Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr.
Here.
Ammons. Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe. Mayor Pressing.
Okay, first is approval of minutes from previous meeting, October 24th, 2016.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Approved, motion by Roberts, second by Smythe. Any corrections or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Any additions to the agenda? I know we have a additional presentation for EDC that will be under presentations. Anything else? Okay, and public input. We have several people that want to speak. Just a reminder, you have 5 minutes, and you'll probably get a 1-minute warning. So first we have Diana Reynolds. Oh, yeah. There's.
How are you?
Good. How are you? So we don't have an agenda item for this, so this is just general public input.
Okay. Well, I'm here tonight because of the crime in Southeast Urbana. As you know, it is escalating more and more. And what do I need to do? Okay. It's escalating more and more. It's getting totally out of control. It's each and every one of you. It is your job to support our police chief and get him the tools that he needs to do the job. If we are short of police, which I believe we are, you need to either borrow from Paul and pay Peter or whatever it takes to get him the necessary money, budget, officers, and tools to beef up this patrol. I know a couple years ago you hired some U of I police officers to come in and work on their spare time. I think we need plainclothes officers out there just mingling where people don't know who they are. I shop out there. We have the usual panhandlers hanging around. The one guy is a staple right there at Walgreens. Thank God County Market closed. My elderly 91-year-old father shopped there because he can't get around very well. So he was constantly being hit up by panhandlers trying to sell their link card or wanting money, etc. It scared me to death. They live on Pennsylvania Avenue. This is where I grew up. It was a great neighborhood. My gosh. And now, when I go to my mom and dad's, I mean, I am preaching, lock your front door. Do not sit in this living room and not have your door locked because people see them coming in and out of the house. Mom uses a walker. Dad uses a cane. I want them to move, but they don't want to. They're 91. So we deal with it. He had a bike stolen out of his garage that was locked. It's just not safe. And it sickens me to see what's happened. It breaks my heart to see what's happened to this neighborhood that I grew up in. I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood back when Sunnycrest and that was just a dirt field. I'm only 30, and I know that's hard to believe, but that's how it is. We really need to think about how we're going to pay for this. If we have to stop putting artwork on the corner, which is what everybody says, we need our streets fixed, we need our sidewalks fixed, we need our police. Why are they putting another statue on the corner? Maybe that's a budget you can't touch. I don't know. But let's figure it out. Let's get more people out there because it's just absolutely gotten out of control. And if this, and I call it an execution, that kid was shot on Learman in the face and in the back several times. They wanted to make sure he wasn't going to testify. That wasn't a drive-by shooting. They were out to murder him. And we cannot have that. So my question to you is, when you go home tonight, what are you going to do to support our police, beef up the patrols, and make this a safe neighborhood again? People shouldn't have to move when they're 91 years old because you can't even go out your front door.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, 1 minute. Well, Pat will know this is the shortest I've ever talked in my entire life. So I'm just going to say, I beg of you to start really, really taking this seriously. Not just seriously, but really seriously, because we are going to end up, and if we're not already, like South Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Reynolds? No. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is Mary Ellen Dorner. Said she did not wish to speak. Is that right? Okay. But she is in support of more efforts to address burglaries in South Urbana. Next is Becky Weber.
Good evening. I've lived in this community for several years, and all three of my children have gone through the elementary, the high school, the middle school. They've all graduated. I work at the high school myself. I love living in this community because it's friendly and it's diverse. When I first moved here, I just absolutely loved it. I would like to say that I've served on a lot of boards. I've volunteered for a lot of activities for Urbana because I truly believe in this town. My hope, as well as that of many of the people in my part of town, is that the city will put the safety of its citizens as a top priority. We would like more resources directed to the police department so they can hire more officers. Frankly, what good are these bike paths when nobody can use them? Because honestly, people are scared to go out at night. They aren't going out and riding their bikes. They're not taking family walks anymore. They're not jogging. We don't see this at all anymore because of the crime. I recently started a neighborhood watch in my neighborhood, and we had a very good attendance from it. But here are some of the concerns that I really want to bring to you tonight that we've been facing. A woman on Curitan was attacked and robbed a week ago last Sunday evening in her driveway at 5:15. She was head-butted, and then they proceeded to strike her in the face several times and robbed her. The next night, my house, someone tried to get into my house at 10 o'clock that night. The year before, I had come home and someone had tried to break into my back window. They broke off the metal. There were burn marks on the screen from a flame of some sort. The house 3 doors down from me was broken into, and she was robbed. The thief was seen walking down the street carrying a big screen TV, and he also got all of her electronics and jewelry. A young couple with a new baby reported someone in their backyard the same night. 4 doors down from me, a house was robbed during the day. They were caught bringing items out and putting them on their driveway until another car could come by and pick it up. The parents were not home that day, but when the kids went home, they were the ones that walked in on the burglary. So these are, middle school kids. The woman just south of me had her yard art stolen from her yard, and it was later found in parts all over Silver Street. Another friend that lives on Silver had friends over, and as the guests were leaving, a car was on their road and was firing a gun. Yankee Ridge School has been on lockdown one afternoon due to gunfire, and people in Myra Ridge have seen people opening mailboxes along their streets. All of these issues were called in, and they're either on a report or they've been documented in their system some way. Other neighborhoods are forming neighborhood watches as well. We need to know how you, our city council, is going to help with this high amount of crime that seems to be concentrated in the 2000 block of North Water Street. We want our neighborhood back. It was a safe family neighborhood, and now it's not. We have many elderly people that live alone, and there are young parents with small children living on our street. I don't even feel safe having my grandkids come over and stay the night because you just don't know anymore. And I hate that because I've waited a long time to be a grandma, so I should get to have them play. We need to know about what we can do to protect ourselves as well. I do have some questions I wanted to address.
1 minute remaining, Ms. Weather.
Okay. Do the landlords do background checks on tenants prior to renting the apartments? Is there a way to get fingerprints done in-house for the Urbana Police Department like the Champaign Police Department does, so they don't have to send them out? And that takes quite a bit longer. Everyone on our street wants our street name changed from Vaughter to anything else because we get calls all the time saying, you know, there was another shooting or whatever, and they think it's us, and we have to say, oh, we're on the good part. Is there any funding available for citizens to put in alarm systems or motion lights around their homes because everybody's having to really lock down? I have a lot of motion lights as well. As mayor and the city council of Urbana, I hope you truly and foremost, your priority should be the safety of your citizens.
Move for more time.
Go ahead.
Again, I want to reiterate that the community wants the city to stop focusing on things like bike paths and artwork and that sort of thing. Those things will come later, but right now we need those are lower priorities. Our main focus should be getting a handle on this crime situation, because if Urbana isn't safe, people are going to want to move out. I know several on my street do. What business is going to want to come? Right now we have, 3 gaming establishments within a block and a half of each other on Filer Road, and that really doesn't bring a lot of employment to our community. And, you know, we have a great school. We really have a great school. And we just have to have the town safe enough that these people want to come and live here and be in that amazing school. But we've got to get a handle on this. I guess I want all of you to go home tonight and think, how would you feel if you had to worry about absolutely everything? You have to make sure you get in your driveway, you have to get in your garage, you have to make sure the garage door is down before you feel it's safe enough to get out of your car. These are things, you know, you don't really, I wouldn't have thought about, you know, a few years ago. But now it seems like that's all we really think about is how we can keep track of each other. I guess in closing, I would like to thank you for giving me this time. I would also like to thank Ms. Marlin and Mr. Madigan for voting no on the pay raises, just because I think you guys do a great job. You really do. But right now, we need some money to go to other resources, I feel. And I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm just saying where we live, we need some help. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Mike?
Actually, I do, and I don't think it's of you, but I think it's a fair question. So I have a business in Urbana, and Urbana has a human rights ordinance. And that human rights ordinance precludes me from using a criminal record as a reason to hire someone. So I'm wondering, is the same standard applicable to landlords? Are they able to preclude someone from leasing from them if they have a criminal record? And I guess I would ask that of City Council.
I'd have to go over the ordinance and I can get back to you. My suspicion is no, they can't preclude that.
Yeah, my recollection is that you can do reference checks at will. You can check references if they don't have the proper references. You don't have to hire them, don't have to rent to them. But, you know,
And you
it's-
can do credit checks.
and credit checks. I think the idea of the ordinance was, you know, people that get out of jail after serving their time deserve a chance. But, you know, if they don't have references, if they have bad credit, certainly you can use that to not hire them or not rent to them.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just asking what the, you know, what the answer to the question is at this point in time.
Okay.
I think it's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, Jim?
Landlords also have the opportunity to evict if criminal conduct is occurring within a unit.
Thank you. Any other question? Oh, Aaron?
So, thank you both, thank you all for coming out to share your concerns. And to be honest with you, there are quite a few people who live in my district who do have to answer those same questions and have been having to answer those same questions for a long time that you all are just now having to learn how to answer and deal with. And no one should have to. I'm not saying that. But I just want to make sure when you ask that question, I put into context for those that I represent. Many of us have been living like that for a long time, okay? Panhandling and all those things that take place on a regular basis, whether it's in our community or on campus, it takes place quite often. Because people do need job opportunities. We do need those, that type of economic development so that we can have job opportunities that would take that incentive away from people or put them under that sort of pressure. As it relates to the ordinance, Mike, that you were talking about, I worked on that ordinance a long time before I got on this council, and it's not true that you are precluded from hiring people based upon their background and stuff like that. The actual ordinance is that you cannot have it on your application initially, but if you make an offer to someone, then you have the right to do that background check to see if there's a conflict based upon what they're being hired for, that position is being offered to them for. So I don't want us to put out into the public some misinformation that you are precluded from hiring people or from doing background checks, because that's not true. You can do a background check after you have made an offer to someone so that we can make sure we weed out the employers who just see felony conviction or something and throw a person's application away, because people with felony convictions do need a second chance and opportunity for employment as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that was cleared up. And again, thank you for coming to share your concerns.
Mr. Ammons, I would like to say that I saw last week, and I saw the two people that came and spoke, and they spoke very well. And I understand their concern for their neighborhood as well. And since it's spreading into more and more neighborhoods, that's why I think it should be top priority to get a handle on it. The police are doing a very good job, but there's only so many places they can be at so many times. And I think we just got to find the funding someplace, because, you know, I know on my street, our properties, the values are going, you know, way down because we're associated with the name Vaughter. So,
Well, I definitely think that it needs to be addressed. I'm not convinced all the time by the arguments that more police mean safer streets. There are cities across the country who have hundreds, thousands of police officers. Doesn't mean that the streets are that much safer. I'm not saying that we shouldn't spend some money if necessary for more officers. I understand that need. But what's driving the crime is what we need to address, and that's going to be the economic opportunities for individuals so that they have gainful employment. So I share your concern. I'm not trying to say that I don't. I want us to have a balanced approach to that, because it's just not more officers if they're not addressing the need as to why people are actually committing the particular crimes or whatever it is that they're trying to do. Just quickly, while I have the floor, Bill, there's some things that are put out as we try to find solutions to problems. And I understand that we're just trying to find a solution. But it's very disheartening for me to hear that we would even entertain, even put out the thought that somebody should be denied housing or something based upon because they have bad credit. That has got to be one of the most growing ways to isolate people who are poverty-stricken from having an opportunity to have housing. So we don't want, I certainly don't want to have this council represented saying something that you should do a credit check and deny someone housing in a particular area because they don't have a 700 score or 600 score. I think that's very troubling for me to hear come from this council.
Eric?
I guess the question is actually for Pat, for Chief Connolly. Is it appropriate for us to get an update from your perspective on the situation sometime in the near future?
What situation are you referring to?
Well, I mean this sort of crime wave or burst of criminal activity in the neighborhood in and near the water.
I certainly can put something together.
I think it would be helpful for us, to consider what we ought to do or could do to hear that.
We do notify you every time an event takes place through a press release and through emails.
Sure, and I think that's very helpful, but I'm trying to put this in the context of sort of the entire public safety issues in the city.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Diane.
Just for a little more context, there are a couple of geocodes in the city where calls for service and crime has been persistently high, and we've heard from people from those two areas in the last 2 weeks. The Learman Aspen Street has the highest consistently over the past few years, and that's followed by the Sunnycrest Water area. So this isn't a new thing. It's not a new crime wave. This has been ongoing for years, and people have been asking for help for years in this area. So it's a combination of policing, it's management, it's looking for economic opportunities. It's a whole combination of things. But this is not a new phenomenon, and these are the two areas that we need to be focusing on.
One thing that I would be helpful for me to see to understand this would be a map indicating calls for service in particular geocodes, let's say over the past few years, to see both the specific things that you're saying and then the citywide context of that.
It's on the website.
It's on the web, and I think the newly hired statistician has plans to do more mapping.
Okay, so I'll pay more attention. Thank you for the alert.
Dennis?
I remember on a bus tour of the city about 5 years ago, Chief Connolly said that when we're driving through these areas that have had high call rates, that throwing more police at the situation may not be the answer, and he commented that a lot of the instances that are where there are indications of difficulty, property management and conversations with property owners and property building managers may be the strongest and most direct way of addressing this, because people have leases that have clauses in them that criminal activity may not occur during their residence there. And you said that you were helping to create a neighborhood watch in your area. And let me ask you then, have you had successful meetings, and do you think that it's making a difference?
We've had one successful meeting. We have another one planned at my house, and the people that came, they were very helpful. They were very patient with us because we're very frustrated. And while I know you're saying that more police is not the answer, just like
it may not be the answer.
Just like in the Learman area, we get a lot of people that are walking from the apartments at 2 and 3 in the morning down our street to, I don't know where all they're going. But if, during the summer at one time they had police on bicycles, and they would come through, and it really seemed like that did help. So I think a presence there does make a difference.
And the most important thing a resident in the community can do if they feel that there's something wrong going on the street is what?
To call it in, and we do.
Thank you very much.
Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, I did, since my name was used in debate, and I was lectured a little bit about what the law is with regard to hiring. I would note that I would wager that I'm the only person on this council who has actually hired people with a criminal record. as the only employer up here. So I understand well what the Human Rights Ordinance says. I understand well what I can have on my application. I never said I was precluded from hiring anyone with a criminal record, which was what was suggested. It's just the opposite. I'm not precluded. I'm precluded from asking the question. And if you've ever been an employer and you cannot ask that question up front to at least sort applications, then you would understand the difficulty of that. But you all do not understand the difficulty of that because you have not been in that situation, and therefore you've imposed that on the employers in this city. So I would just suggest to you that before you start lecturing me about what the city law is with regard to employment, you ought to practice it yourself. And that would require you to open a business and actually employ people and provide jobs for this community. So I do take a little bit of exception to being lectured about employment law from people who've never had to employ anybody.
Okay, I think we'll move on.
Can I say something about this?
It wasn't a topic that was on the agenda. I think that might be better to just wait and put that on a separate agenda. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that everything we do is basically related to public safety, whether it's public works or fire, police. So it's always foremost in our ideas, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about what we have planned.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Daryl Cruz.
Good evening. I live on 2007 South George Huff Drive, which 3 years ago was the safest street in Urbana from looking at crime statistics. Just to let you know, in the last year our car was broken into. We had a package taken off our front step 2 months ago. So I understand some of the frustrations people are expressing in that part of town. But I think it's really, really important that when you look at societal problems, that we look at the totality of them and balance them against root causes, possible responses, and see if we can find a way that our response reflects addressing the problem in a way that will resolve it. I come to you tonight with just a little bit of a minor issue that I just want to bring to your attention. Last Monday, I was watching the City Council meeting and a presentation by Melissa Hayes and Chief Conley in terms of the statistical report that they gave you. And of course, I've read that in detail. I think I even sent each of you 4 pages of first reaction to that. After that presentation, I've been going through the second one and looking at the information and have a number of questions that I just wanted to share with Melissa Hayes. So I sent an email to Alex and to Mike and asked what's her email so I can just forward this information to her. And it's taken about a week to get a response. And I got this email today. I'm told that any inquiries you have for Melissa should go through Lieutenant Fitzgerald at his email address. And I was kind of taken back because in the past, whenever I've had questions, whether it's in community development or in finance, you can email those departments and different people, and the city staff has always made themselves accessible and available to the public. The Urbana Police Department has always done that. Andy Charles has told me, email him anytime I have a question or something of that nature regarding what's going on. He even responded to the message that I sent you a week ago, which I responded to and expressed my appreciation. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what role does Melissa Hayes play in this work that we're trying to do in understanding IDOT traffic information? And I'm wondering why a filter is being placed between the public and the statistician. I don't know if I should see that as being troubling. In other words, in order to send questions or comments to a city employee, that it has to go through the police department first? For what purpose before she receives it? I have no problem CCing email messages to Sergeant Fitzgerald or Mike or Chief Conley, as long as it also can go directly to Melissa. But there's something in terms of transparency, accessibility, that seems, for some reason, that the control of the statistician is now moving away from the public, maybe even the city council, and falling under more direct control of the police department. And I will mention to you the IDOT Traffic Stop Task Force, Paul Tessa, the statistician that worked at that point, Eric can admit, he encouraged people
Yes.
to contact him. I was in constant email contact with him. He responded to questions. He provided information. He wanted to see what the public's concerns were. And so my question to you is, can I have Melissa's email address and be able to email her comments and questions like any other city employee? And I'll read a quote. I'm told, I don't know who I'm told by who, any inquiries you have should go through Lieutenant Fitzgerald. That's not a very positive sign for the public. If you're looking
You
at
have 1
transparency,
minute, Mr.
openness,
Cruz.
to be told that. I hope you can address it very quick so I can have a conversation with our statistician. Thank you.
Thank you. All I know is that in the org chart, Lieutenant Fitz, or is it Lieutenant? He's one above her, so she is an employee of his, so he would be her supervisor. So I can imagine that would be why.
Well, I don't mind sending it to him, but I would like to. Why does there need to be a filter? I've never had the head of a department filter when I've done community development or finance or anything. And it raises unnecessary suspicions, like who's controlling the statistician. How do I know if Lieutenant Fitzgerald censors, or, oh, here's the way I want you to respond to the questions? She should be independently studying the data and reporting it without any influence one way or the other from anybody, me or the police department or you.
Any other questions? Mr. Roberts?
I know that we've also been told not to direct staff, that they have job assignments from their department heads, and the work and hours that they put into different assignments is not supposed to be something that the city council members assign or require of the city staff. So even we actually have to respect the work assignment schedules of employees here in the city building. So maybe that's one of the reasons why that was mentioned.
Eric?
I think that the public should be able to contact Melissa directly. I do understand that, I do understand the protocol that, and ordinarily do respect the protocol that you've cited, Dennis. On the other hand, I do know that sometimes I have violated it when I felt that there was a matter of some urgency that was really necessary for me to get directly to somebody with very detailed knowledge of the situation with which I was dealing. So, but I think in this particular case, balancing this sort of protocol issue on the one hand, but on the other hand, I think the necessity for transparency and accountability to the public, I absolutely do feel that it's appropriate for public to be able to contact Melissa, and I can vouch for the what Daryl says about the person who did the statistics for the IDOT, the traffic stop study. He was totally open, totally forthcoming, and I think that really was extremely beneficial. I don't think that, you know, I think Melissa's very good and very strong-minded. I don't think Daryl is going to push her, or anybody else is going to push her into biasing her statistics in his direction, or that anybody is going to succeed in doing that. So I don't see any downside to making her email available to the public.
Okay. Thank you, Daryl.
I have a
Oh,
question,
Aaron?
not for Daryl, actually. I mean, the question is being posed, which is obviously disturbing to the public and some of the council members. Chief, can you tell us why that's the case, why this filter is being put on, why we don't have direct access to Melissa?
Certainly. First and foremost, Melissa has many job responsibilities within the police department, providing all the FOIA requests for all the requests. I appreciate what Paul did. Andy Charles was on the IDOT task force, therefore he worked very closely. I, of course, opened all of our records to that, and for a year and a half, people bombarded, specifically Daryl Cruz, bombarded the police department with questions, and every one of them was answered at the time that the request was made. Melissa has a lot of responsibilities. She has a supervisor, which is Lieutenant Fitzgerald. The questions, I'm the police chief that is responsible for answering not only Daryl Cruz's questions, but the entire city and the entire community, and we have to have a filter or she would be overwhelmed and we would lose her within the year, and I can't afford that because she's a phenomenal employee, and I guess that's the simple answer.
Okay, thank you.
So the this particular situation, I think there was a lot of impetus here from the council to support the hiring of Melissa or a statistician based upon the IDOT traffic stop.
Certainly,
reports
but
and
it
stuff.
doesn't put me in a position where she has to answer every question that is posed by every member of the public. We have to, as you said earlier, we have to balance the ability of the limited staff that we have with the requests that are made.
So as we think about that,
I'm sorry?
think about that, always take, putting things into context and having an understanding. I don't know, I mean, certainly if you said to me, or if Daryl Cruz had came up here and said, this is the 100th time I've emailed her, or the 10th time, or the 20th time I've emailed her, and I haven't gotten a response. But to say that, someone like Daryl, whom all of us up here know, who spent years working on this, to send the statistician that we finally have an email, a question about a few things, I think it's more than reasonable to expect
Okay,
that
thank-
she would
thank
she
you.
would answer that that particular email and not have to be told that that Daryl has to respond to Lieutenant Fitzgerald. And so you disagree with that?
I do. But it doesn't matter, I mean, I answer to the mayor, and that's the direction the mayor supported when we got this position, and I have to agree with it. I don't think we can have every member of the public emailing Melissa and posing questions to her.
And I'm not suggesting, and I don't think Mr. Cruz was suggesting that every member of the public should be able to email.
But why would Mr. Cruz
I'm sorry,
have the
can I
ability
finish?
to ask
I might be-
questions and other members of the public couldn't?
If I might be able to finish before you rudely interrupt me.
Excuse me.
I don't think Mr. Cruz or anybody else is suggesting that the entire public should be able to bombard you or Melissa or anybody else with a
Okay,
bunch of
good.
emails.
Thank you.
I'm saying, taking into consideration all the work that's been done around this, everyone's been looking for this statistician to come into play. And someone like Mr. Cruz to be able to ask a question, I don't think that should be filtered, especially if he's going to send it to Lieutenant Fitzgerald or whoever, right?
Okay.
And so if we want to give the impression that we're actually serious about addressing this, right? Because, then we would want to have that level of transparency that comes from everybody, right? And you said you answer to the mayor, you serve at her pleasure. So are you saying that the mayor supports not having
I'm
access
not
to?
speaking for the mayor. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else? May I be excused, as
Yes.
Alex Batista said several weeks ago?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Karen.
much. We also have note from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood saying they do not choose to address us at this time, but ask that their positions be entered into the record, that they're still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. And a note from Elderess Melinda Carr saying she does not choose to address the members, but asks that she is still but to say that she has still continued concerns about Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues and historic impact. Thank you all. So next we have some presentations. We have a presentation from the EDC, Craig Ross.
Thank you. While Don is getting us, that didn't take long. Thank you for having us. I'm Craig Ross, the Director of the Economic Development Corporation for Champaign County, and Don Elmore is the Director of our Small Business Development Center that's housed within the EDC. And we're here to tell you just a little bit about what the EDC does. And before I get into that, since this may not be a household word for all of you, or you don't talk about the Economic Development Corporation frequently, I'd like to just explain that we're a regional economic development organization. We're a 501c6 not-for-profit. About half our board is public sector and about half is private sector. Councilmember Marlin and the mayor sit on our board, and Brandon and other staff members come frequently to our meetings. And our charge is really regional economic development. Simply put, this is it is an economic region, and we think that, or many people and governments here think that the best approach is a regional approach. Our employment, our retail is all regional, and so our charge essentially as the Economic Development Corporation is to promote the regional economic growth. So we'll go through a few slides and I'll hit on some high points. Don will talk about the Small Business Development Center. There's a few comments and slides in there on the airport, and Gene Cossey is here sitting behind us from the Willard Airport and available for questions if they come up. So let me go through. One of the things, I'll hit on several of the activities that we perform. We have, in addition to Don and myself, we have an international trade specialist in our office. We have a reception secretary position, and then we have an assistant director who does the communications, HR, and finance work in our office. So we're a very small staff, and I guess I'd describe our charge as helping other people get things done as opposed to carrying out all the tasks ourselves because of the size of our staff and our very conservative budget as well. One of the things we do is attraction and retention. So we work with the companies that are the principal employers in Champaign County. Like I said, it's a regional employment marketplace with probably 10 to 12 counties at play and several 100,000 employees that frequently travel back and forth between communities or one county to the other. And so we're working continuously with those companies to make sure they know who we are, and then we ask them a lot of questions about their employment challenges, workforce development, and ask them if there are any things in the community that they could do to improve the quality of employment or the quality of life. We've made 18 retention visits so far. I may point out that retention used to be a scheduled activity, and you made sure you saw every company once a year, and has tended to go more in the direction of improving a positive working relationship with companies and making sure we're communicating with them regularly as opposed to an annual visit kind of scenario. And that's served us well. When we need to, we talk. They need to know who I am so they can call when they have a question. I need to know them well enough to give them a call as well. The next thing I wanted to touch on is communication. We spend a lot of time communicating the advantages of the Champaign-Urbana area and the University of Illinois. Champaign County is home to a great deal of quality of life, economic activity, one of the best universities in the world, and we tout that frequently. So the You're Welcome CU program campaign was developed in order to be able to communicate to the outside world that this is a strong destination for new jobs, new companies, people to move here, raise children, and we've been particularly successful in the tech job sector. We are a growing attraction, especially to the coasts, because you can buy a house here for half the price. Commuting is much easier, and we have a really deep high-tech sector that's starting to develop in employment, which is a real advantage. When Robert Scoble was here, he went to all of our, visited a number of our companies, and live streamed on Facebook, was one of the early pioneers in live streaming, and so far 88,900 views have occurred on Robert Scoble's visits to our local companies. So he spent time at the park, he spent time with some of your businesses on Main Street, and it's interesting. Sometime if you tap into Robert Scoble's feed, those videos are still available, and Pixo and others were involved in those visits. It was a huge success, and that's the kind of thing we're trying to repeat over and over again about communicating what is going on here in our community. The You're Welcome CU program has generated a lot of press, and we have had positive press in a number of national publications about why is the Midwest attracting people from Silicon Valley. And so one of the things that we are putting out on the You're Welcome CU website and frequently on social media are these articles and information about what's going on here in our community. The You're Welcome CU program is also an opportunity to get media out there in front of the community residents and visitors. If you've seen the buses, we're wrapping a lot of buses with messages about, and again, these are messages about this is a great place to live, the quality of life is high, it's much easier to commute here than it is on the coast, and so we have the messages on the bus. We just wrapped a significant number of elevator doors, columns and walls in the Illinois Terminal Building, again with messages to those who are visiting here or thinking about moving here. If you notice, the water tower now has a message on it that's seen by hundreds of thousands of people as they travel on the interstate, and it points out that we're the heart of innovation. Our community is a powerful force of innovation. We do a number of events, so we have Innovation Celebration every year. The 11th annual one was held with more than 400 people attending. It's an opportunity to showcase some of our pioneers in our companies that are so successful here, and we intend to keep doing that event. So we'll have another one in January of this year. In addition, we've gone to D.C. and Springfield, and so we visit. Councilmember Marlin and the mayor have attended on these visits, and what we do is go see our legislators in D.C. We have another trip planned in 2 weeks to go to Springfield and talk to our legislators in Springfield to bring items of high importance in the community to their attention or projects to their attention that we're seeking funding for, and we've done that for a number of years, taking community leaders and business people to the legislators to make sure we pursue our agenda. The Illinois Small Business Development Center is hosted by the Economic Development Corporation, and as I said, Don is the director of the SBDC. We are funded by the state, and we have been getting grant funding to operate that Small Business Development Center, so Don will explain how that works.
Thanks. So, excuse me. So I can answer the question of what my job is very easily when people ask me. I help businesses succeed. I help new businesses figure out what their model is and how they're going to make it viable. I help existing businesses in specific areas if they're recently I had someone who's had difficulty finding a couple of really key people to hire because he wants to expand his business, and we can talk about resources that are available, things that I can do to help, other programs that are available. We were talking about the VETS program, which is Veterans Education and Training Services, which has a number of things to look at. We can go from business plan, financing, legal services, marketing needs, online marketing. All these things are very important for small businesses. I'm going to give you quite a few numbers. I'm going to try to just cover the highlights, but these numbers are pretty important, I think. Between last year and this year, I took this job in March of 2015. Our ITC specialist was there a little bit before me, and Craig took over the EDC about a year before I got there. In that time, we have added a lot of new clients. I'm going to talk about the impact in Urbana specifically in just a minute. More clients, more advising hours, a lot of new clients. People of color and female clients is a very important aspect of what we do. I have some more information about that. We also conduct a lot of seminars and workshops. We have things pretty much every single week on one topic or another. This is a little small, but there's some information specifically for Urbana. So we've advised in the last, well, this year to date, 267 clients, and we have 111 clients in Urbana alone. About 190 new clients. We have a lot of long-term clients. Our counseling hours, we average, Kathy's averages is higher because of the exporting things she does, but about 5 or 6 hours average per client. And that's affected by a fair number of clients that come in once, figure out for one reason or another, maybe this is not for them, and I don't see them again. But we do have more than half of our clients are in business rather than just startups. 21% female, 32% minorities. So as I said, more than 50% of my clients are women and people of color. We had quite a few workshops and events, 23 so far this year, almost 350 attendees, about 15 or so per workshop. They're very well attended. So I want to talk a little bit about, specifically about Urbana, the business development grants. This program started a couple of years before I took on this role, but I think it's worked very well. The Economic Development Division, Brandon and his staff, work with me very closely. They refer clients to me. Also, some other very good sources in the community, guys like Matt Cho, also send clients my way. I help them with some, business counseling, try to make sure they have everything sort of organized to give them the best chance for success. Help them a little bit with the application process and working with the Economic Development Division. They've approved 9 grants so far this year for about $17,000 in grants. And since the inception of this program, there have been grants awarded to 58 businesses in Urbana for $110,000. And you can see the impact in downtown. It's pretty evident if you walk through there and know the businesses that have participated in this program. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the International Trade Center. I'm going to use this Central Illinois tour just as an example. This is export assistance. So if your company exports products or you're thinking about exporting products, you need to come to our center and visit Kathy Cravens. She's well known not only throughout the state but throughout the country for her expertise. And just recently we had a Central Illinois tour that also included Decatur and the Midwest Inland Port over there. And the feedback from these representatives of 14 countries was just really positive. They were just blown away by what they saw here. And a lot of them, one of the things that was typical was they're stationed in large cities. And so that's usually what they see. And these were mostly stationed in Chicago. And they came down here and a lot of this was news to them, but they were very, very impressed and they saw opportunities here. So that's part of the outreach thing that the ITC does and the EDC, and I wanted to make sure we pointed that out. One of the big things we've been working on for a while is Bridge, the virtual incubator. This has been supported by Champaign and other providers through the EDC. It's a virtual incubator that I'm going to talk about just for a little bit. This is all about context. There are portals all over the internet that you can find. If you want to start a business and you say, okay, well, I think I want to start my business in Urbana. What do I need to know to do that? You could find it, maybe, but it's going to exist in a number of different places. One of the goals here is to try to provide some context for a new business or an existing business that has specific needs. So, for instance, where am I here? Okay. So, this is what the website looks like. So, here's the main area, and if you wanted to look at Urbana, you could just scroll right down here. Here are the major areas, or the major providers. The Urbana Business Association is also here. But if you went to the city of Urbana, here are the links that can help you. There's a little bit of an overview that was provided by the economic development folks. Some other links to areas depending on what you're looking for. As this grows, this will build out some more. We'll have events posted. I'm getting ready to send an email out soliciting blog posts from people in the area with expertise in specific areas. And I think we had a little video, but I think I'll skip it just in the interest of time. There was another shot of the provider page for the city of Urbana. But whether you are starting a business and you want to know about business planning, financing, what kind of municipal incentives are available, what about locations, what about permits and licensing, if it's anything that's related to food service, you got to have the right permits and licenses. This is the place to come, and you have some context, and it points you to the services that are available now and then, points you to me, which I always like as well. And now we'll go back to the EDC.
Just quickly, we gave you packets with a lot of information in it, and I won't go over all of that information, but we have our annual report here that's full of statistical information, who's on the board, those kind of interesting facts. If you asked me what the two most pressing elements of our economic development work was over the coming couple of years, I would have to emphasize workforce development being probably one of the most important ones, and the retention and growth, if possible, of our regional airport. Air service is important to the companies that our employees work in. It's critically important to the University of Illinois. Jet service to Chicago is crucial at this juncture. The 6 flights a day are very important to this community, and we are constantly at risk of losing air service. And we have one major carrier, and that's not a good position to be in. We may diversify the number of air carriers, but we also need to diversify the destinations and the flights. And so one of the things we did was an economic study, which is summarized in a piece that you also have. And we went out and fundraised for this, so it wasn't all public money. We got a lot of the private corporations listed on the front to contribute funding to start to put this in context. What does this mean for the economy of the region, in addition to the importance to the companies of having the air service? So it's one of the most important things we've been working on, and I believe it's critical. The decline we'd see if the airport declines would be slow, but it's almost a sure bet that we would lose a lot of traction in economic development if we don't maintain a strong regional airport presence. And we've had some real good success lately. We want to end quickly here so you can ask us questions. And like I said, Gene Cossey, the director of Willard Airport, is here. He and EDC have worked very closely together on the airport and the production of the study, and we're also working on another effort to try and get some fundraising done for the ability to add flights. Currently, we've done a study and are working on adding a flight to Charlotte, which gets us to the East Coast. And that's our next we think is our next critical step in that. One other thing to point out, this is a point of pride item that we spend a lot of time promoting, but the number of goods and companies that we have in Champaign County producing imports for all around the world, but primarily a lot of it is consumed here in Champaign County is really important to us, and we promote the use of and support of our local industries and our local retailers. A couple things in the works. We're redoing the strategic plan, so next year we'll spend, we've been kind of focused on the budget in the last 6 months, but hopefully we get past the minutia, get the budget straightened away, especially with respect to state funding, and we're able to do more work on our strategic plan. We are working on our data constantly. On our website, the address of which is in this publication, there's a lot of data available. We use data sources. We'd like for you all to trust that you can get data from us when you need it. And we have some of that on our website, and others we can generate reports and data when you are in need of it. So please use the EDC for that. We have access to probably the largest collection of economic data in the region. That's the end of our formal comments, and we'd like to take questions from you all.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, Craig, thanks, and Don. Couple of things. What were the topics that you took to Springfield and DC this year?
We had a number of local projects. So there was a trail out in Mahomet that they're developing to connect all of the park system together. We talked about rail. Rail is another one of those things pretty high up on the list with the airport, and that is, you know, we had one of our senators say, quit bringing the Star Wars project to us and talking about it, the high-speed rail. And we've never given up on the idea that someday we'll have high-speed rail, but we need to work on the low-speed rail first, and we need to make sure that we keep the number of trains that we have currently running on Canadian National and don't lose the rail service that we have. It's critically important to both business and the University of Illinois. And we spent a lot of time with the Department of Transportation and Amtrak in DC on that.
Yeah, well, you know, that raises a real sore point with me, because I'm a regular user of Amtrak, and the same issue when I visited DC is still a problem with Amtrak. I mean, it's always late. I mean, I know the schedule and I know how late they are. It's predictable, you know. The train from Chicago it's supposed to be here at 10:11 in the morning, 10:30, 10:35. You know, you're going to be late.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it has a terrible on-time performance record.
Yeah, and you know, and to make it worse, they pad the schedule so that they can be late through the small towns and through our town, and then claim to be more or less on time by the time they get to Chicago or to the south. And it just doesn't work. I mean, here's a great resource. It's got a lot of usage, and Canadian National is getting away with delays. And I just don't understand why their safety record isn't out there in the public, that they've got safety problems, and they're not meeting their contractual requirements.
We actually spent a lot of time asking our legislators and the administrators at Amtrak those same questions. And there is at least one legal case right now trying to resolve the question of CN's responsibility to allow rail service on their lines. They have an obligation to provide the passenger rail. And the question, I think, is how well do they perform in allowing that to happen, and are they providing as much cooperation as they should? And I think that's part of a legal case that's in place now. But as you all know, one of the biggest Amtrak problems is just a plain budget situation. You've got them running on single line on CN, which is a timing or a time delay question, but the other one is a budget. They have 40-year-old rail cars, and so when they look at the budget constraints, even adding another train or keeping the trains we have becomes challenging. So your message has been carried to DC. The one you just articulated so well it's occurred every time I've been in DC. and we don't always get direct and responsive answers to it. But we'll keep going. I mean, it's important.
Yeah, I appreciate the value of the SBDC stuff. I know a number of friends have used your services, and they're succeeding. So that's a great thing to have in this community. And I like the way it's tied between the way we do grants and your offices. And then maybe there's a small measure of success in one tiny little number here, because I recall that the commute rate used to be 13 minutes, and it's now gone to 14. So we must have more people commuting. I'm going to take that as a positive sign.
I think so. The question is, how many more minutes can we add on to that before it's slow? You know, it's too slow.
Diane?
Thanks. Thank you for the report. I know at the monthly meetings we hear over and over again about manufacturers looking for employees, and the folks in the building trades talking about how the workforce is aging and they need to replace them. And so workforce development, I think, is one of the most important things to be focusing on. Do you want to share some of the things specifically that EDC and the board members are doing to address the workforce issue? And it's also important, one of the things I've learned is that manufacturing of today is not, you know, the manufacturing of yesterday, and those jobs aren't just the kind of jobs a person can walk into with no education, or, you know, even a high school diploma may not be enough. So what kinds of things can we do to prepare people to take the jobs that are there today?
There are a number of, again, I think workforce is up at the top of the list. The companies that we're talking to say that they have they're reaching a crisis level in being able to get the employees to fill the replacement of the baby boomer generation as they leave the workforce. They're very experienced employees, 20, 25 years of experience or more, and they have jobs. They have $50,000 a year jobs with a 2-year certificate in industrial technology, and they can't fill the positions. They say, why can't we fill these positions? And part of it is the point you make. This is not, when parents hear the manufacturing word, they think of, you know, an old plant where somebody did the same job all day, dirty environment or hot and dangerous environment. Many of these are advanced high-tech jobs that a PC runs the assembly line, or people are doing very complex advanced work on the equipment, and they're having trouble filling those jobs. So we're working with Parkland. We just had a session recently where we're doing some job shadowing and employment work with the companies, where students actually have a chance to work in a company while they're in the last 2 years of high school, with the idea that the company then can hire them after they graduate, or they can go on to Parkland and do the same thing. So it's the idea of getting the companies in the schools and the schools in the companies, and they see this. They come into one of these places, and it's, you know, people are producing items on CNC machines that cost millions of dollars, using computer equipment to operate them. They're clean environments, extremely safe, and they're good jobs. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do to expose them. Unit 4 and Unit 116 both have programs, and they're very interested in expanding those, so that, again, they emphasize the fact that there are many good jobs in our community, and they don't all require a 4-year college degree in order to get those jobs. So we intend to keep doing that, where we hold those sessions and kind of hold. Education is the key to that, obviously, and so we push hard for making sure that the kids in school are not just getting STEM classes, or not just getting you know, their regular coursework, but they're also learning a trade or a skill that will help them when they graduate.
It's good to have a follow-up.
Sure.
I read in the paper yesterday that Effingham is developing, I think they called it like a vocational training center. I mean, it sounded like it's outside the school system. And
Yes, those are becoming more popular, and our districts have actually talked about, either jointly or separately, creating some of those. It's almost an incubator type of environment where you get out of the school, the day-to-day school environment, and into a workplace environment, and have real equipment supplied by the companies that are going to hire the employees eventually.
How are those funded?
I don't know about the Effingham one. I'll look into that and see if we can get you
That sounds like a really neat, well, a different approach to something that actually would solve this problem.
We've seen school districts that have taken this on really seriously, getting past the old days of taking apart lawnmowers and making things in wood shop to keep people busy, to really have programs where they have meaningful labs and exposure to these jobs, and the student is ready to apply for the job when they get out of school.
Eric.
So I have perhaps a naive thought about Willard Airport. I'll preface it by saying sometimes I fly out of Willard, but sometimes I drive to Chicago. And I drive to Chicago if I have a trip that's going to be absolutely destroyed if I don't make the connection out of Chicago. And I just can't take a chance on that. So it occurs to me, and maybe this is totally naive, that if there were a backup bus to O'Hare from Willard, not Plan A, but Plan B, so that I would still get there the same day and take advantage of the many, connections out of Chicago, that would make a big that would make a big difference in my utilization of Willard, and I'm thinking maybe a lot of people's utilization of Willard. Is that a crazy idea, or is that a possibility?
Well, I'd never say a council member's idea is a crazy idea, but
Well, sometimes you should.
That is an interesting idea that I will take into consideration as we have these discussions. But since we have an airport expert here, maybe the on-time performance piece of that, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. The two things I hear most often are either about parking, which sometimes is somewhat of a red herring issue, and the one you've articulated. And Gene, actually, we've had a lot of conversation about this. Gene has a little bit of information, if you'd allow him to answer that question.
Yeah, I'd really love to hear a knowledgeable answer.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me and giving the opportunity to answer your questions. I understand exactly where you're coming from on that. To be specific to your question, most of the delays or cancellations we have are very seasonal. They occur around the times of the year when we have really bad weather. And they actually limit us to where we only have major delays or cancellations around 3.5% of the time over the whole year. Unfortunately, those hit the majority of them in very specific times, and it seems like when you do fly during those times that you have a lot of opportunities to be delayed. Spread out over the year, they are very limited and they don't occur very often. So the limitation that puts for backup transportation systems is it doesn't become economically viable for a company or provider to provide those. It is a good idea, and it's a great idea if we have a way to make it economically viable for somebody, or we have a way to fund it and pay for that availability. I am looking into some added ways of adding additional values of ground transportation out at the airport, and that would be one of those things that would help become available, but it wouldn't be the singular focus of what a company does. It would be an additional focus of what they do to provide that backup transportation.
Well, my only response would be that perhaps I have been singularly unlucky, but my travel is not confined to particular times of the year. I travel year-round, and I've had a couple of just like really terrible experiences, and I just am not going to do that again.
Yeah, and the other issue that delays are actually a far worse problem sometimes, especially when you're talking about tight connections, than cancellations are, because again, the cancellations out of here are actually very low. But delays happen, especially being that Chicago's the main airport that we're going into, and Chicago gets a lot of delays just for the smallest of reasons, and those delays replicate themselves through the system and just trickle across to all the different airports in the region. And unfortunately, you do prevent that by driving to Chicago. The one thing we always ask everybody is to try to give us that first shot and that first chance, but we do understand there are times when it isn't as practical for you. To that point, The other things that we're working on is getting additional destinations so that there's alternatives to your travel. So if you do get delayed on one flight, there would be an alternative to a different location where you might be able to make another connection. And we are working on that effort as strongly as possible.
Charlie.
Which actually brings me to my question for you, which is that, I was reading one of the industry publications, and there's a projected shortage of pilots.
Yes.
And I'm pleased to see that Parkland stepped up and took over the training program, but there's still a big gap developing. And is there something we can do, some incentive to work? I know there was some talk of working between Parkland and one of the regional carriers in terms of providing them pilots or something. I don't know what I forget exactly what I read.
Yeah, the pilot shortage is a national issue that goes all across the United States. It is global in many ways, but it is more specific to the United States because of the strict requirements that were placed on becoming a commercial airline pilot back in 2009. The driving of the pilot shortage is both it's multiple faceted. It comes from the cost of an education to become a pilot. It comes from the relatively low wages that pilots make on their entry-level positions, and it comes from the fact that a huge number of the pilots that are currently in the workforce are retiring or about to retire, and so that we're losing a strong pool of pilots right now. So it's not a localized issue that locally we can say we're going to solve the problem. Whatever pilots we produce here may go anywhere in the United States to get a job and to fly aircraft. So we do need to look at how do we solve this problem on a national level, and communities such as ours, as Champaign-Urbana, the county, other communities this size, getting involved and making it very clear to our legislature in Washington that it's an important issue to us and it needs to be fixed is one of the best things we can do. Now locally what we can do is provide incentives for students because that education is extremely expensive, so providing scholarships, grants, and other incentives for students to take those programs is important.
Well, it's my understanding that one of the things that's holding up getting another destination is a pilot shortage.
Yeah, that is true.
And I was expecting American to have its bigger planes already, but they're not.
Well, so that's a good news, bad news thing. The good news is fuel prices have went down dramatically. So because fuel prices have went down dramatically, they've kept the smaller aircraft in the market longer because they are economically viable for them right now. Back when fuel prices were, pushing the $100 a barrel mark, they were wanting to weed the 50-seat aircraft out of the market as quickly as possible because they just weren't making any money. Now that fuel prices are low, they're actually making money on those aircraft, and they're keeping them in markets. They will continue to move.
Prices haven't gone down to match, so yeah.
That's correct. They will continue to move forward with the larger aircraft, and we are in a position to take those aircraft. So I would see in the near future, within the year to 2 years, that we're seeing the larger aircraft predominantly in our market, which will help, but it still won't necessarily help with the issue of having multiple destinations instead of just 6 flights to Chicago and 1 flight to Dallas. One of the biggest things we can do to help alleviate Councilman Jacobson's problem is to have additional destinations besides just Chicago. So those are the things we're working on. The pilot shortage is a major factor in that because it's one of the issues that the airlines all tell us is they have to be careful of where they put their resources at, and it's right now they're all tied up in other places.
Aaron, did you have some?
Yes. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming to share this information. I do want to learn a little bit more about EDC and what you all do. I've heard quite a bit from different people who are a part of EDC. And I see what you do as is very critical for our local economy and even beyond, and for us attracting talent and things like that as well, even public safety, right, because of job opportunities. So I take what you do very seriously. And so trying to understand a little bit difference between an EDC or the UBA and things like that? You all work, you coincide, work together, or is EDC something a little bit different?
Yeah, let me address the EDC question. It's a really good one. Obviously, the communities all have their own efforts, and UBA is your effort, similar to a Chamber of Commerce that's actually promoting most directly the things that are going on Main Street or commercial activities in Urbana, and Champaign has a similar focus in some of its urban areas. We believe we are important because we're looking at the whole region, and we are trying to stimulate an economy, like I said, that's a much larger economy. There's a great deal of crossing over. It's rare, actually, that a person lives and works in the same community. There's just as much, driving to another community or even 40 miles down the road. It's an amazing thing in this part of the country. You don't have to drive, and a lot of people drive to their jobs. So I believe that, to use a sailing expression, pulling on the big ropes, I think EDC tries to look at the broadest picture and make sure our large companies, a company like Kraft, for example, or Dart in Urbana, can't exist in just one of those communities with just their population as a workforce. It's much bigger than that. And obviously Parkland, with its multiple community funding base, has to be engaged in educating that workforce. So I think the answer to that question is we're trying to keep the focus regional and large picture, and look ahead far enough to make sure that we're touching on the big things, and at the same time then supporting the quality of life components. I mean, you all do a fantastic job with UBA and the Chambers of Commerce, and the communities do a good job with that. But you have to look out and up sometimes in a bigger sense. And I think if we're doing those two things simultaneously, we're probably doing the best job of quality of life. And the airport questions were fantastic, because those really reinforce this idea that if we don't develop that component of the regional transportation network, we'll all shrink as communities within this economy.
So for the regional approach, you do want to bring people outside of the city to come into Urbana or Champaign, looking for the larger employers. And so when it comes to attracting a larger employer, with you spoke of Kraft, who we know Humco is gone, right?
Right.
So what sort of efforts are in play to bring back larger employers like that, who can employ hundreds of people, if not more? That would be that's one of my questions I have for you.
Well, that's twofold. If you take a company like Kraft, their workforce vacillates between 1,300 and 1,600 employees, so sort of depending on market forces and employment patterns. But it's crucial to make sure they can stay and grow here. Those companies now compete region to region or plant to plant against each other. They have the plants compete for the most efficient production. And one of the things we have to make sure is that our labor force and our environment, our tax schemes and all the other things that affect their costs work for them so that they can operate here efficiently. So we're spending a lot of time talking to them about that, or growing. In the case of losing Humco, the outcome actually didn't turn out to be too bad, because there was a large warehouse facility placed right next to Kraft, and they're actually interconnected to each other to serve the Kraft plant. That was a strength, not a large employer, but a very big strength for Kraft being able to stay here. So one of the things we try to do is work with those employers. Landing the big companies is a lot more difficult, but if we don't have a good story to tell in the size of the workforce, we're studying that now and actually going to update our workforce study to be able to explain to them that this is a 10-county workforce. It's much larger than it would appear if you looked at Urbana or Champaign by themselves. But when you look at several 100,000 people in the labor shed, if you want to think of it that way, willing to travel, we have a significant workforce, and that's the story we have to be able to tell to those companies.
I'm almost done here. For the other gentleman, you spoke about something that is very near and dear to me. I was going to ask do you all track diversity in the businesses that you help develop? And then you showed me the stat that showed that you do work on that. I don't know how far you go into that, but you definitely pay attention. I appreciate that. One of the things in the work that I do in other capacities, I've been able to dig a little bit deeper sometimes on these questions around female and minority, right? So I want to ask you, how do you define female when you look at your stats or your data and stuff like that? Is that the white female, or does that include all females when you look at the data that you have?
Well, it's interesting. I've been asked this question before, and since our clients essentially self-select when they register, they can choose those categories. And I was asked before, well, how much overlap is there? For instance, can we pick out minority female clients? And I can go through client by client because I know them, and I could pull that data out and tell you. But what I found when I looked at the statistics that are easily generated by the CRM software that we use, and then looked for overlap that would show some error, there actually wasn't a lot of error, because when the clients self-select, for instance, a female minority client would first select a gender, and then there would be a place where she could select minority, disabled, veteran, etc. But almost always they have not overlapped on those areas. I'm sure there are a few, and if you really want to know, I'd be happy to go through and
I
do
think
them
it's important
individually.
for us all as we work on this. MWBE stuff is very important to me. But being able to tease out if there's a African American female, is that female being listed under female and minority, right? So in many cases, when I dig a little bit deeper, that's what I find. So whenever someone comes before me with that type of information, I want to make sure that it's teased out so it's clear for everybody to see exactly what that is. So there's no overlap there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. It's also important from just the standpoint of metrics and stuff for the state, but also for me, is access to opportunities. I didn't mention, we have a woman that we work with. She covers a pretty broad area in the state named Mary Turner, who works at the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. So if you have an opportunity to be certified as a minority business, female-owned business, veteran-owned business, disabled business owner, we have a person whose entire job is to help facilitate that process, and it's really important. I've had clients that I've met for the first time that have been 2 years into the process of trying to get certified by the state as a minority contractor. And that's a really difficult process if you don't have somebody who can help you, who knows how it's actually done.
What was her name again?
Her name is Mary Turner. She comes to our office. She works out of Western Illinois University, and these specialists are getting more and more rare throughout the state, mostly because of funding issues. But we have an arrangement with her to make sure we get her over here once a month, and she usually has a pretty full plate when she's here. She's actually coming on Wednesday, and I just scheduled a client with her earlier this afternoon.
Thank you.
Eric?
So it's a little concerning to me, given the potential and current capability of Parkland to provide training for workforce and the need for it. It's a little concerning to me that I see that Parkland's enrollment is declining right now. So is there, I'd just like to ask you to comment on that. What are the things that can be done, should be done, are being done to enable Parkland to meet the need that's there?
Well, first of all, Parkland is a key part of Economic Development Corporation, and they like Urbana, and I should have started this by thanking you for your annual contribution to the EDC, because you do support us in a very meaningful way, and so does Parkland. They sit on our board, and we spend a lot of time with their industrial and tech training people. It's a serious problem, and I think that until we get to the point where people believe they can come to Parkland and get real training for those actual jobs, that we may continue to see the decline. So one of the things we'd like to do, for example, is build these programs where an individual actually goes into a real workplace and develops a skill on their equipment with their staff and their training, as well as working at Parkland. If it's not the same as working on a series of valves, screwed to the wall, where you're learning how to do something very general, as it is to be in that workplace. And so that's one of the things that we'd like to do, is develop more specific programs. And Plastipack and Craft and others have done that in the past. We'd like to make those more standard, more frequent, and have larger number of students in those environments.
So if I could do a follow-up, and again, maybe another crazy idea, community colleges are not generally residential, but I wonder if there's a chance to provide some kind of housing for people who would come into the area to take part in bridging between Parkland and local employers who need the kind of training that Parkland can provide.
That's possible, although what we've heard from Parkland is people keep their costs down by not residing here and actually commuting to Parkland. I think their bigger challenges are cost. So as the cost of education goes up, it becomes a barrier, and we can address some of those cost elements. And the other one, I believe, is that people have to really believe that when they get that degree or that certificate, there's a job waiting at the other end. It's a luxury to be able to go to school and not have the confidence that you're going to be employed when you're finished. And they're strong programs, nursing and dental hygiene and others, where there is an actual job waiting at the end of that. Having a certificate in hand, are very successful that way, and I'd like to see us work together with them to try to duplicate some of that success. When you get out with that certificate, you're going to have a job at this company kind of outcome.
Okay, Dennis.
On a slightly different track, perhaps, I want to know, as regional developers, do you see tourism as being an important aspect of interest regionally? And if so, how does that relate to our city? What would be the strengths of developing tourism connections through as a part of economic development for the community? And what specifically do you think could be evolved or accented for the city of Urbana, for example?
I believe it's very important. I also believe that we have a strong player in the Visit Champaign County organization that helps bring some of those big events or grow big events here. That's positive. I believe what Urbana and Champaign are doing right now to have attractive draws in your downtowns and in campus town is important, because it gives people a reason to come here. I'm always amazed in either downtown when I come on a weeknight or a weekend night, and there are so many people from outside our community visiting here. We are the place where people come, and there's places like Black Dog to eat and Crane Alley to have one of the best beer selections in the region, and that kind of thing is really important. What you're developing on Main Street with the outdoor activity is working, and so I think in addition to the quality component, we have to keep the diversity up. The neat thing about the whole Champaign-Urbana area, especially when you add campus town in, is the phenomenal diversity in the kinds of food and the places. And one community tends to be lean in one direction, another one tends to lean in another, so that it's all there, whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's more in the arts vein, we have the arts. Whole Foods, I think, is a huge opportunity. Locally grown food here is a huge opportunity to really start to be known as a region. And I think pushing on some of those, again, increases the size of the draw. But the marathon and a few big events that grew very quickly really proved that this place can handle a big visit. It can handle a lot of tourists at once. And some of that's because we're used to it with the athletic events and other things. And I think that we'll continue to try to focus on that. It's big. They're big dollars. They're millions of dollars every year generated by visiting.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. It's a good discussion.
Thank you again for your for your support. And we love it when you ask us questions and send things our way. So send people to Don, ask us the questions. That's what we're there for. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next we have staff reports. Anyone have a staff report? Brandon.
I'll quickly go over some highlights from the October Business and Development update. A couple notes on the Urbana Public Arts Program. The 2017 Arts Grant program is now accepting applications. Open Scene, 12 community stakeholders have been selected to be a part of the Open Scene NEA-funded placemaking grant in downtown Urbana, and one of those adult stakeholders is Fire Marshal Phil Edwards, which we're excited to have participate. There will be 12 youth also selected in the coming days. November 12th will be the first Market in the Square run by UBA at Lincoln Square Mall. November 22nd will be our Business and Development Luncheon, the last for the year, and actually Craig Rost will be our speaker. So we're looking forward to hearing more about what the EDC does and giving an opportunity for our businesses and developers to hear more about all the good work EDC does. Quick highlights on some of the projects taking place. Schnucks is in the midst of a nearly $900,000 remodel of their store on Vine Street. 25 O'Clock Brewery is actually underway now with their construction or renovation at 208 West Griggs overlooking the Boneyard Creek. Unfortunately, Dr. G's Brainworks has closed its retail location at Lincoln Square Mall and is consolidating to its location at Marketplace Mall. Burger King is the new building on University Avenue is under construction. The structure is going up now. Leek & Sons is also underway in its new funeral home at 1215 Bradley Avenue. We held a ribbon cutting this past month for Eastland Apartments, 40 new residential units up at 1905 North Cunningham. Paul Tatman's property at Industrial Circle has a new tenant that they're currently remodeling to accommodate FBM Drywall. This is a new employer. They're going to have about 20 new jobs, and it was actually a call for sites that came through the EDC, which is another service they provide to us. They sent out the call to local realtors, developers, and economic development folks, and Paul Tatman was successful in attracting that employer to an Urbana location. Of course, we're always excited when an employer comes through that process, whether they locate in Champaign-Urbana. We want them to make the best choice possible, but we're especially excited when they pick an Urbana location. Planet Fitness is open on Philo Road. Marco's Pizza has completed its remodel, but I don't believe they've opened yet. And then there's plans pending for U-Haul's renovation of Southgate Plaza on Philo. And I'll just leave it at that. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Brandon? Nope.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a staff report? Libby Tyler.
Lots going on. Just some announcements. This week, Habitat will be dedicating their 90th home in Champaign County. So really incredible accomplishments. This will be Thursday at 6 p.m. in Urbana, 1403 Eade Street. And this is for the Martin family. Also, RSVPs are due for the next Business and Development Luncheon. That'll be next Tuesday. And if you whet your appetite with the EDC tonight, you can hear more from them because they'll be presenting that program. And there'll be a Thanksgiving-themed lunch. So get your RSVPs in for that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. And Bill Gray, did you have a staff report?
Yes.
Okay.
Couple updates. We did get Windsor Road open Thursday, so we're pleased about that. The weather really helped out in accomplishing that. The facilities division's been very busy with roof replacements and repairs. Fire stations 1, 2, and 3 roofs have been addressed. The chiller on the second floor here, roof that work is almost completed. If you've been to the basement, we have new tile downstairs that's been replaced. If you took a double take when you walked in this room tonight, we have new carpeting. Hopefully you noticed that. And in the second floor hallway and conference room, the carpet work has started and should be completed later this week. So, and then the Public Works garage roof repair was done. So we've had a lot of work. Thanks for the money in the budget. And I want to give you that update.
Thank you. Okay, if that's it for staff reports, we'll move on to the first resolution on the agenda. Resolution number 2016-11-066R, resolution to support the establishment of a property assessed clean energy PACE program for commercial properties in Urbana, Illinois. Public Works, Scott Tess is here to tell us about it.
Good evening. Before I get to SD 116, I just want to mention also in the packet there's a one-page memo. It's just mentioning that staff has supported and other stakeholders have supported the Regional Planning Commission in a process to create a regional water supply framework document. This is a menu of best practices for municipalities and other entities in the region to safeguard the quantity and quality of our potable water supply. And so the memo has a link to the full document if you're interested. So regarding the resolution agenda item, there are 3 documents in your packet on this. The first is the memo. The second is a resolution passed by the Sustainability Advisory Commission in their recent meeting. That resolution asks Mayor and Council to support SB 116, Illinois General Assembly Bill SB 0116. And then the last document is substantially the same format as the SAC resolution, excepting that it is from the perspective of the council. And that's a draft resolution authorizing the mayor to support Illinois General Assembly Bill SB 116. So SB 116 is a bill that would authorize the creation of green special service areas. This would be a new type of special service area in the state, and it would allow a concept known as property assessed clean energy, or PACE. PACE is a financing and repayment mechanism that allows for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects to get loans and repay them through a voluntary special assessment on the property. So instead of a short-term construction loan taken out by an individual or a business for a project that pays for itself, but pays for itself on a longer time frame than a short-term construction loan, PACE allows for a different mechanism, and I'll try and describe it for you briefly. So a property owner could work with a contractor, identify an energy efficiency or renewable energy project that pays for itself. The owner would take that project and find a lender, a private sector lender, that's interested in a PACE type loan. The owner would submit their project and their prospective loan to a green special service area administrator who would approve it as a bona fide energy project that pays for itself in no more than 20 years. At that point, the owner, the lender, and the tax collector would enter into an agreement whereby the owner's property would join the special service area, enjoy the loan, the private sector loan, and the lender would get repayments on that loan through a voluntary special assessment provided by the tax collector. At that point, the commercial property owner gets the loan, does the project, pays the contractor, enjoys the utility bill savings and then begins to make repayments on the loan through the voluntary special assessment to the tax collector, who then renders those payments to the lender. Simple enough. The expected benefits of PACE include 100% project financing from private lenders, payment terms that more closely match the utility bill savings, repayment that stays with the improved property rather than the owner or the business. So this is something that I think it's 32 states have authorized. There are active PACE programs in 19 states. Most of these are commercial PACE programs. The bill that's in the Illinois General Assembly is only considering commercial PACE type programs. They're not looking at residential at this time. The PACE Nation, which is a leading PACE advocacy organization, in their most recent market update for quarter 2 2016, identified 40 new projects in that quarter among these 19 active commercial PACE programs, totaling $25 million invested in energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So the Sustainability Advisory Commission drafted this and approved this resolution of support. I think they see it, and I agree that it's a way for the city and the state first, and then the city, to support our climate action plan goal to explore different ways to engage businesses in energy efficiency and renewable energy purchasing. And this would be a way to do it that would not cost public sector any dollars. All the financing would come from private sources. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Questions, Dennis?
Yeah, so you made a little clarification that I was wondering about. I was going to ask you, like, can you describe a project that would benefit from this? And I was thinking first those individuals who wanted to have solar panels installed in their homes, but now you're saying it's not residential. So if DART Corporation wanted to have solar panels on its roof to make energy, or put up a wind turbine, they could take advantage of these funds to install the equipment, and then there would be a payment over time through a property tax assessment.
Correct.
So it's business only.
Commercial
Do
only.
you think it'll ever become residential?
There were a couple of residential PACE programs that started, and then some federal agencies that are engaged in housing policy and the housing market issued some guidance, and that kind of cooled the residential PACE programs. I think there are still some that are active. Recently, federal agencies have issued new guidance that's a little more friendly to residential PACE. Probably that will continue to develop, and I think it might come back as a separate bill in the future in Illinois.
And currently, and I haven't ever applied for one, but at sometimes there were reductions in federal income tax if you had a green project in your home that would reduce, be energy efficient. I mean, I think it was even things like new water heater or something, new roof or whatever it would be. Is there a project like that currently in the federal tax system?
Yes, there's a 30% federal tax credit for installation of renewable energy. It's really important in financing these types of projects. The most recent law passed by Congress steps that down over time. I don't know the exact schedule, but presently it's a 30% federal tax credit.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mike.
So these may be unfair questions, but I'm just looking at the progress of the bill in the General Assembly, and I'm sure others probably have as well. It was introduced on January 28th of 2015. It has one Senate sponsor. It passed on a 35-12 roll call So there clearly was opposition. I haven't had time to look into why that is, but I'd be curious to know what you know. Why do people oppose this kind of thing? And I guess the other observation that I would make is that so the bill's been in process for almost 2 years. It just literally got out of the House Rules Committee today. So maybe something's afoot. I don't know. But I'm curious. So 2 questions. One is, why are people opposed? And why doesn't it have more sponsors? There's 1 sponsor in each house. None of our local legislators are participating at all in terms of sponsorship.
When I spoke with folks at the Environmental Law and Policy Center about the support in the State House, they indicated that no one's really opposed to it. Obviously, some people voted for it, as you mentioned, or voted against it, as you mentioned. But they said no one's really opposed to it. They just are engaged with other things in Springfield, was how it was described to me. So yeah, I can look into why there might be some opposition, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, yeah. So the whole engaged with other things doesn't fly with me. Everything gets vetted in Springfield. There's always a reason. So, and I'm just curious why there would not be more movement on a bill or more local support from our local legislators. And frankly, I think that this effort is premature to encourage it when we don't even know why our local legislators aren't actively engaged in the bill.
Anyone else? Dennis, could you take the chair? I have a couple questions.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, do you have a
Okay.
question?
Yes, I have a couple.
Commentary.
So I'm trying to visualize how this works at the local level. I don't know why they would be opposed to it at the state. It doesn't seem like it would put too much at risk for the state. So this would become kind of a lien on the property then. I mean, in the sense that it goes with ownership of the property. So if someone were to sell it, they would still have to pay back the loan with the property taxes. So in order to enter into the contract, would they have to get permission then from any mortgage holder of their property?
Different states set it up different ways. The preferred best practice, I think, is to get prior approval from the mortgage holder.
Okay. And then if it's in a TIF district, does that affect anything? They can't get repaid what they pay for this part of it, right?
I think they would be totally separate. I think the intention is for this mechanism of a green special service area to follow the typical rules of other special service areas, but I think they would just be completely separate from a TIF.
Okay. And then I looked through the bill briefly. I didn't look through it today, so I didn't know it was out of committee, or it was out of the Rules Committee. So maybe it's changed since I looked at it, but I didn't see anything about private lenders in there. So is there something that just by passing this bill would enable the private lender to participate? Because the bill mostly focuses on, I think, the jurisdiction as being the lender of.
There was some other language that was really unrelated to the way that this would proceed as a green special service area, authorizing PACE type activities. In all the examples I've seen, there's no public sector lending going on for PACE districts. I think the whole idea is to find a better, a more advantageous way for private sector lenders to participate in these types of projects.
And then the Illinois Finance Authority, how does that play into it? They would buy the loan from the private lender, then buy the bond or something.
I don't think that's necessarily related, but I don't know the answer to that. There was other sections of this that I'm not as familiar with.
Okay.
Is it all you needed?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, I turn it back to you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Eric?
I just looked at the roll call. So Senator Bennett did vote for it. President Cullerton voted for it. So did Minority Leader Radonio. Why Senator Oberweis and a few other people didn't vote for it, I don't know, but it seems to have had pretty wide support.
Any other comments or questions?
So just
Mike.
quickly, I think I can probably answer your question about it, the commercial note and the bank. I don't think the law necessarily has to require the bank's prior approval. I think the actual contract, the original mortgage, would cover that. Because businesses have to provide financials on a regular basis, and if the business were to incur some kind of additional indebtedness or some kind of encumbrance, some kind of additional expense that could impair their ability to repay their note, then the bank can call the note or force a restructuring of the note. So the bank has rights under, the original lender would have rights under the current mechanism, just based on what their contract, what their mortgage contract says with the business. So I don't know that has to be incorporated in the law. I think the bank itself takes care of that through the original contract.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Then I would entertain a motion. Or Dennis, did you have a question?
No, I thought
Comment?
I'd say that it seems reasonable to try to support not only the city's environmental goals, but to allow businesses to try to achieve green technology conversions in their own right, through their own choices and through their own initiatives. So I'm going to move that we adopt, or that the resolution 2016-11-066R, the resolution to support the establishment of a property-assessed clean energy PACE program for commercial properties in Urbana, Illinois, forward to the City Council with approval.
Second.
It's been moved and approved, or moved and seconded to, moved by Robert, seconded by Jacobson, to send this resolution to council. Charlie.
Quick question. Scott, will you be able to come back with answers for next week?
I can.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Aaron.
Scott, could you email me some of the details? I don't have it in the package, or just...
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, if not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Scott. Next, we have resolution number 2016-11-067R, a resolution estimating the tax levy fiscal year 2016 to 2017. It's Finance, Elizabeth Hannon.
So it's that time of year again. So I'm going to start with the big picture and then talk a little bit more about the details, because I think most people probably care most about the big picture. So ultimately, as the mayor and I talked about the strategy here, she determined that our goal would be to either remain at the current 13550 tax rate for the city, or reduce it to a rate comparable to the City of Champaign rate, and we would be able to do that if the hospital properties are back on the tax rolls. So at $1.355, our current rate, the owner of a home valued at $150,000, which is about the median sale price in the county, would pay $596 in city taxes. If we were able to reduce the rate to $1.3152, that same homeowner would pay $579 in taxes. While that might seem like a relatively small savings, it reflects the fact that city property taxes are a little less than 13% of the total. So the lion's share of the property taxes that our residents pay do not go to the city. A little bit of good news here. I'm estimating that when the levy is extended, our assessed value will be about $543 million. That's an increase of about 3.9%, and that would be the first significant growth in assessments the city has seen in a number of years. If hospital properties were included, and that's a big if, because we don't know the timing of that state Supreme Court decision, that would increase by about $109 million to $652 million in assessed value for the city. So in terms of details of the levy, the mayor recommends again funding pension levies at the statutory minimum. That would require a levy of about $1.1 million for police pension and $866,000 for fire pension. And that is after allocating a portion of the required funding from personal property replacement tax, which is required by state law. The library tax levy would increase by 3.85%, and that's consistent with their budget for FY 2017 and with the policy the council adopted on levying property taxes for the library. So the library's levy would be $3,109,000. Remaining funds would be allocated to the general fund to pay for services such as police and fire protection. At the higher $1.355 rate, if we don't have the hospitals on the tax rolls again, that would generate about $2.3 million in revenue, which is an increase of $188,000 in the calendar year 2017. If the hospital properties were on the tax rolls at the lower 131.52 rate, that would result in a substantial increase in general fund revenue of about $1.4 million. That could be allocated to deferred capital improvements or other expenditures that could be identified in the budget process and which council would approve as part of approving the city's budget. There's a whole lot more detail here, but I'll leave it to you to ask questions, I think, at this point.
Any questions for Elizabeth? Diane?
It's on the increase in the EAV. I know I've read about how campus area properties in Champaign saw a pretty high increase in their assessment this year. Is that, were campus area properties in Urbana assessed and included in this estimate, or has that been done? Do you know?
This isn't primarily driven by campus area properties, though I suspect that there were some reassessments in that area, but nothing, I think, on the scale like you're seeing in Champaign. The growth in the base EAV is about 50% due to new construction, and about half of it is just due to normal changes in assessed value.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie?
So the reason the estimated levy is higher, sort of a big number there that not used to seeing, is because of the inclusion of the potential Carl property tax numbers, right?
Right, yes. I
okay.
neglected to mention the actual estimated levy number that is in the resolution that you have there is $8,746,910. So that is a high number because we can always reduce it, and we will certainly reduce it by abating the levy to achieve our desired tax rate. But we don't want to have to increase it when we adopt the final levy. There's a state law that we have to comply with called the Truth in Taxation Act, and it requires us to make this estimate early so that we can share that information with the public and hold a public hearing and receive input. So this is the highest number I would expect to levy, and we would only levy that number if we achieved a very high assessed valuation, including all of the hospital properties.
Any other questions? Is there a motion? Charlie?
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second. Oh, go ahead. You can.
I think you started first, so go ahead and take it.
I call Dennis.
All right, then. There you go. All right,
Safe.
so I'll second it.
Okay. Moved by Smythe, seconded by Dennis, to send this to council with recommendation for approval. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have ordinance number 2016-11-108, an ordinance of the City of Urbana, Champaign County, Illinois, removing a certain property from the downtown Urbana tax increment redevelopment project area number 2. Community development. Brandon.
Good evening. So the process for establishing the new central TIF required us to close TIF 1 and remove certain properties from TIF 2. In short, we missed one, and that's why we're back before you today to take that property out. Passage of this will also trigger the need to do more noticing, and we'll take care of that if approved. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions, Dennis?
Yeah, and can you describe the property? I was going to go drive by and look at it, and I forgot to do that, so tell me what it is.
It's Bunny's.
Thank you very much.
Which, yeah, of all the properties.
Of all the properties.
Gotcha.
But,
could have been a good field trip.
Diane.
I move that we send ordinance number 2016-11-108 to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
It's moved by Marlon, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Oh.
No.
Was that any vote? Oh, no. That motion carries. Aaron.
Yeah. So I wanted to make a statement before we leave here tonight, as it relates to some of the comments that were made earlier today. And I feel that there was a bit of deception that took place that needs to be corrected from my perspective. So this evening, when the police department was asked why the public was denied access to the new statistician, in particular, why she was told that any of Daryl Cruz's inquiries needed to be directed to Lieutenant Fitzgerald, the response was because we can't allow Melissa to be bombarded with emails from the public, and that's why there needed to be a filter. Mr. Cruz clearly stated that the perception was that the new statistician was being strongly guided or controlled by the police department, which would undermine the trust and the faith of that the public wants to have in that position. In response to Mr. Cruz's concerns, it was clearly communicated that there was no attempt or intent on behalf of the department to control the new statistician, and that it was simply a need to keep her from being overwhelmed by his email. Well, some of you know that last week I requested a meeting with the new statistician, and I followed up on that. And recently, as of today, it was communicated to me that I could meet with the new statistician, but there needed to be a member of the UPD present at that particular meeting. So, again, there was an attempt this evening to get the public to believe that the denial of access to the new statistician was based on a workload issue. My meeting has little to nothing to do with her workload. So why does someone from the police department need to be present when I meet with her if it is a workload issue? So I just wanted to make that statement and let the public know that there's a bit of maneuvering going on that they should be aware of, and that Mr. Cruz's concerns, I believe, have been validated by the way that it was suggested that I need to have a police officer present if I meet with this statistician as well. So, thank you.
Chief, did you want to say something?
That one was at the direction of the mayor. Very simple answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing no
Well,
further.
I'd like to add in.
Oh, sure.
I got a call from Alex, an offer for a meeting, and it was indicated to me that there would be other personnel in the meeting as well. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything unusual here.
Well, since everybody's chiming in, I've met with numerous members of different departments, and there was never a need for a supervisor to be present in order to facilitate that meeting as a statistician that everyone has been waiting on to see. And for the purposes of transparency, why is it necessary for her to have a member of the police department to be present when the meeting takes place? And again, it was communicated to a citizen who's been very involved in this issue that it was a workload issue as to why that person would not have access or be able to even get an email response. But that is not exactly the case as to why why Melissa is being guided or whatever by the particular police department. There are other issues that obviously exist there. So I just wanted to make sure that the public is aware that it's not just what it was proclaimed to be earlier in the meeting.
Do you think we should have access to employees as an agenda item or something, or do you want to continue this, Eric?
Well, I just want to, I think that would be a good agenda item, but I just wanted to chime in. surprisingly and uncharacteristically enough, in agreement with Mr. Madigan. I think that I have a meeting with Melissa, and there'll be other staff members there tomorrow, and I think that's completely appropriate, partly because she's so new. She doesn't have the kind of background in the local issues that other people would have, and I don't expect that this is going to be maybe I'll be surprised, and maybe she's going to be guided by some other senior person to be very guarded, but I don't expect that. I think it's just to help provide context for her, because partly because she's new, and partly it's fine. I mean, look, I have people working for me in my research group, and sometimes when they meet with people from other groups, collaborating groups or related groups, I may sometimes decide, yeah, it would be good for me to be along and help to provide context, and I don't see anything sinister about it at all.
So everyone, all of the council members, are just proving my point. What is wrong with, because at first we were told that, she's the greatest thing since sliced bread. She knows her stuff through and through. She's not going to be controlled or guided by anybody. And then you turn around and say, yeah, well, it's probably in the best interest that somebody be there with her because she needs context. She ran the numbers. She knows what she's doing. People want to ask her questions about the numbers. She can answer the questions about the numbers. She doesn't need Lieutenant Fitzgerald, Chief Conley, or anybody else there to answer some doggone questions about the numbers that we see on the paper. She doesn't need any further context than that. She was hired to do this particular thing. That's what she's supposed to do. She doesn't need anybody there looking over her shoulder to see if she's saying the right things or doing the right things. So it's ridiculous for you all to say that. And again, what was presented to the public this evening was that the reason that the public was denied access to this person who was requested by the IDOT Traffic Stop Commission was that it was a workload issue when the man sent an email and he wanted a question about an email that he sent. It is not an appropriate response as to why the public is being denied access to this person that we're paying and that we've been asking for over a year, period. And it's not. So you all can continue to, deflect if you so choose, but it's not surprising that that's what's happening.
Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.